this happens. Okay, so it is really a pleasure to welcome today's speaker, our friend and fellow congregant, Dr. Deanne Edwards. She will be telling us about her experiences as a beekeeper and producer of Shalom Honeycomb brand honey. Diane has a truly amazing background and range of experiences. She grew up in Chino, California, and attended schools K through 12 there. She then attended college at University of Laverne, where she earned a bachelor's degree in journalism. She moved to Riverside at age 23 and worked as a photojournalist for the Press Enterprise for a number of years. Later, she continued her higher education at University of Laverne, earning a master's degree and then a doctorate in psychology. After this, she opened a full-time private practice in family and marriage counseling and has continued practicing as a therapist for over 20 years. Deanne is also an avid gardener and initially became interested in bees as she was cultivating organic vegetables in her yard here in Riverside and noticed that she was short of pollinators. And so today she will be telling us about bees based on her experience maintaining hives in her backyard and also in producing Shalom Honeycomb honey. And she is joining us remotely from her new hometown in Santa Cruz. So welcome, Deanne. Thanks for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule and being with us here today. So as usual, we'll go through the presentation first, and then we'll go back into gallery view so that people can raise their hands to ask questions. Okay. So you're on.
Thank you, Dan. All right, I'm going to take us over to some photos here. All right. Everybody see this so far?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so as Dan said, I began gardening organically back in 2010. This is me quite a few years ago. Over the years, I focused on creating a thoughtful and nourishing garden made up primarily of edible plants. But in 2015, I really noticed that I had very few pollinators, and I began to wonder what it would be like to bring my own pollinators into the garden, meaning get a beehive. So I was well aware of colony collapse disorder and the rapidly decreasing bee population. So the thought of being part of a movement which supports bees in the health and welfare of bees just felt right. So I set out to get my first colony. That's my first little beehive, and I put it right back in the corner of my yard, and that's called a worry hive. And I got that, and I went to a class on beekeeping, and I met other like-minded folks who were out to rescue bees, and I really, really fell in love with bees and the way that they live. They're fascinating creatures. So I began to join a group of middle-aged ladies. This is Marcella and my friend Mary, and we began to go out and rescue beehives in places that people normally don't want beehives. This was our first bee rescue, and bees love meter boxes. They like areas that have a little opening and a cavern inside. So this was our first rescue. And then we began to get more and more people calling that there were bees in places that they didn't want them. And so this is a rescue of inside of a wall of a home. And beehive had quite a colony growing there.
Deanne,
So yes.
Do you have to rip open the wall, or does somebody else do it?
No, we cracked open that wall with the crowbar. Pretty sturdy ladies. And yeah, and get our hands up in there and pull out that comb. Yeah, we pretty much did all that ourselves. And then what happened was each time you rescue a beehive, then I began to have more beehives, right? We all, and I started having friends have beehives in their yards, and basically found myself with a whole lot of honey. So then this is a jar of honey. It has a little piece of honeycomb in it. And I thought that would be my niche, was a piece of honeycomb in it. And I called it Shalom Honeycomb. And my daughter-in-law developed the label, and my son is a lawyer and he got it trademarked. And I began jarring honey in a kosher way, and away I went. I'll talk a little bit more about where Shalom Honeycomb is right now in just a little bit. So this is a piece of comb honey, and honey in itself is a kosher product. So honey is basically flower nectar, and when the bees collect the nectar, it goes into a very special stomach in their body, and then they put it in the cell, the wax cell of a honeycomb. So it's actually the kosher part of jarring honey is basically how you jar it. So what makes honey kosher from the perspective of jarring is that all utensils, everything that touches the honey is dedicated to the harvesting and jarring of the honey. It's not used for any other purpose, and it's washed separately from other utensils and stored separately. So let's see. I wanted to cover a little bit about bees and beehives. So this is the 3 different kinds of bees in a hive. Worker bee on the left, the queen in the middle, the larger bee, and the drone is the only male bee in a hive. So let's talk first about the queen. So if you can see the queen there, she's right there in the middle with a very long, darker abdomen. And so the queen is the mother of all bees in the hive. The queen can lay over 2,000 eggs a day, which is actually twice her body weight in eggs, which is actually kind of miraculous in itself. The lifespan of a queen bee is 2 to 5 years. Used to be 8, but it's actually declining now. So much stress to the hive. So she's not living as long. This is a worker bee. The majority of the bees in the hive are worker bees, who are all female. So a hive has about 30,000 bees in it, and the majority of them are these little worker bees. And this is what you're going to see out foraging. You can see the little pollen pocket on their legs. And they're actually a little electrostatic. So when they land on a flower, they accumulate pollen on their legs. They have a mouth specifically to draw in nectar. So, and what they're doing too, not on purpose, but when they go from flower to flower, they're actually pollinating the flowers. They're sort of the legs of flowers, of plants. This is a drone, the only male portion of the hive, and he's got big eyes. He doesn't have a stinger, so you're never going to get stung by a drone. And like I said, I think I said they're only 15% of the hive. So this is an actual frame of brood, are the babies. So you can see in the bottom right-hand side, those flatter cells are baby worker bees. And up top left, those are drone cells. So they're the bigger cells of the male bees. And drones, the only thing a drone does is actually fertilize a new queen. So they don't have a real big purpose. This is capped honey. And when the honey is a perfect ratio of water to nectar, the bees will cap it, and honey will last thousands of years. It's just the perfect ratio, so it never goes bad. But you have to wait till it gets capped for it to be like that. So this is honeycomb, and it's actually made from an excretion out of the abdomen of the bees. And they pull it out of their abdomen and they hang together and they develop these little cells. And they start at the top and they make their way down to the bottom. I think it's pretty artistic. So I want to talk about swarms. Right, this time of year, there are lots of swarms out there. So what happens is it's very much what happens in spring. So when a hive becomes too big for the space that it's living in, it creates another queen. And this is the daughter of the current queen. So this is what a queen cell looks like. So what happens when they realize, oh, we're getting too big for this space? What they do is they create the queen creates another queen, and So there's the daughter of this queen. And what happens then is the daughter goes on a mating voyage. She flies up to a mile high in the sky. And while she's flying, drones from all over are up to 40 drones are mating with her. And then she then comes back to the hive. And the mother queen, she leaves the hive, the old hive, and takes half the bees with her. And who's left in the hive, the original hive, is the daughter and half the worker bees. So the mother, basically the original queen attaches herself, that's back here in the branch. And all of those worker bees just surround her. And what they're doing is they'll have scouts out looking for a new home. And those are the bees that are out looking for water meter boxes or holes in your wall, any little opening that has a cavernous inside, and sometimes fallen trees or trees with holes, usually more natural way that they go. So yeah, so that's and one thing to remember when you see a swarm is first it will look like a big cloud of bees flurrying around, and then they attach themselves to the branch. And ultimately, they are absolutely harmless at this point because they're homeless and they have nothing to protect. So if you see somebody with covered in bees, sometimes people will do that. They'll take the queen that just left the hive and they'll put her on them, and all of the worker bees will come onto them. And they're actually not going to be hurt at all. Bees not going to sting you because they're more focused on just being close to the queen. It's pretty fascinating. So what I want to do now, though, is I want to show a video. And the video is on colony collapse disorder. And it's actually the trailer of a documentary on bees. And it's called Queen of the Sun. So I'm going to share the video clip.
The relationship of bees and flowers is one of the most beautiful co-evolutionary relationships we have. Bees are the legs of plants.
Beekeepers, they are chosen by bees. You can brush by mustache. And they like.
If bees left this world, I wouldn't like it because there would be no honey, yeah, and no fruit.
Colony collapse disorder is the bill we are getting for all we have done to the bees.
If we didn't have bees to pollinate our crops, we'd have to eat just bread and oatmeal, all the time, and a couple of nuts.
If bees are dying, birds will be dying, plants will be dying.
We could call it colony collapse disorder of the human being, too. Steiner's prediction has come true.
So many of the problems we face come down to one thing, and that is monoculture.
The bees can't even live there. They'll starve to death.
From the point of view of nature, it's insane.
We've bred a race of super mites with every new chemical we throw at them.
Pesticides came from warfare. And of course, they instantly kill the pollinators.
When you see an airplane spraying, there's this tremendous feeling of not being able to do anything. I really don't want to lose them.
I'm really finding out why I'm beekeeping is to keep that going for my children's children.
Our very lives depend on beekeeping. The bees sort of let me know, go ahead, we'll help you. Honeybee sanctuaries are springing up like mushrooms in this country.
And they're coming closer. Only in the Bronx, baby. Where are you gonna find a swarm?
You see the little antennae? It's lovely.
Oh, look at this. Dripping with honey.
People say that they can't keep bees. They're lying.
Okay, let's see. So what you just saw with the woman covered in the bees, she actually had a queen on her, And all those worker bees were, I think it's fascinating. I would love to do that. So back in 2006, colony collapse disorder was first identified. There are a variety of factors responsible for the dramatic loss of bee colonies. So this is sort of a diagram of all the different factors. One is that there's been an increase in something called a varroa mite, and that's a mite that lives on the bee. It's a parasite. It depletes the bees, and then it leaves the bees more susceptible to viruses and different kind of fungus. So also chemicals used like pesticides, herbicides also weaken the bee. If there's not enough forage for the bee nearby, then they have to go further away to get forage, flowers, nectar, pollen. That's malnutrition that wears on the bees. And also monoculture means, just having one crop in an area. So basically people who have like almond groves, they have to hire beekeepers to bring bees in, and there's migratory beekeepers, and they just travel throughout the country with bees on trucks to different crops. And so it's really exhausting for the bees. And what you saw in the clip there was they pour corn syrup just to feed the bees to keep them alive. It's a pretty sad situation in many ways. I mean, for a little window of time, the bees seem to be kind of coming back. But I was just reading that according to preliminary results of the University of Maryland's annual survey of US beekeepers, they lost 43% of their honeybees between April of 2019 and April of 2020. And that's the second highest rate of decline the researchers have observed since they started the survey in 2006. And the last few years that I was beekeeping, everyone was losing at least half their hives a year, either due to mites or just in Riverside due to also the high temperatures and not enough forage. So we want to next talk about a difficulty I had in Southern California beekeeping, and that is the Africanized bees. So this is actually in my old backyard. This is a beehive I had. These are two beekeepers and researchers from UC Riverside who came to my backyard to take brood from my Africanized hive. And if you can see the bees heading into the veil of the beekeeper. The one thing about the Africanized bees is that they have a real knack for knowing how to debilitate you. So they will go right for the face, right for the eyes. And they're just extremely, extremely aggressive. And I eventually, before I left, I donated this hive to someone who lives way out in the country and wasn't worried about the fact that they were Africanized. One interesting thing that Southern California beekeepers are doing, like when we would rescue a hive, there are actually people who breed queens, docile queens. And so what you would do is if you rescue a hive and you realize it's an Africanized hive, you go into the hive, you find the queen and you remove her. And then you put in a docile queen, and many people would overnight them from Maui, essentially trying to get queens from other places to change the demeanor or the temperament of the hive. So the hive is dictated because all of the babies in the hive are from one queen. The queen dictates the mood of the hive. So if you want to have a nice docile hive, you want to find a queen that's very kind of calm and easygoing. And each hive sort of has a personality. So if you have Africanized hive, they just have a tendency to be very mean. This hive I rescued and I never replaced the queen. So it just got bigger and they just got more aggressive. So UCR actually a couple of years ago brought beekeepers from all over the world to come and study the Africanized bees, because the one thing about them is they're very resilient and they don't seem to succumb to varroa mites as quickly. They don't produce as much honey as more, less Africanized bees do. but they have a tendency to be more resilient. So they're trying at UCR to, I think, try to take genetically the resilience of the Africanized bees and work with those to also make them more docile. So I don't know where that's at because COVID hit, and I'm not sure what eventually happened, but I thought it was a wonderful project they were working on. So this is me now up in Santa Cruz, and I'm all decked out for Africanized bees, and I was placing this hive in the backyard of this friend of mine, and I asked Emily Bonder, she's Santa Cruz Bee Company, to come help me, and she shows up in shorts and a sleeveless shirt, and because the bees up in Santa Cruz are really pretty mellow, and there's no infiltration of the aggressive bees from Southern California. So that was kind of funny. So this is where one of my hives is right now, over here in really beautiful little backyard. And so what can you do? It sounds, a lot of kind of grim in many ways, but you can definitely help the situation by planting things, flowers, things for the bees to forage. And remember, the bees, honeybees are from Europe. They came over from Europe, so they like things like basil, thyme, rosemary, lavender, borage, sunflowers. They love all of those things, and but you have to let them bloom. So if you have basil, you have to let them come to flower. And those are all things that they will just be thrilled if you can give them. They will forage up to 3 miles, but they prefer to stay closer to their hive. So one thing that's really important in Riverside especially is to put a little plate out of water with little rocks. Bees are drown easily. So if you have a swimming pool, you know that they have no ability to swim. But if you give them a plate of water with some pebbles, they'll be able to get a drink that way, and you're kind of doing them a service, a little drinking fountain. So now where's Shalom Honeycomb? Now 6 years later, my little business has evolved into a different kind of project for me. I moved to Santa Cruz. I have 2 hives, and I actually share the honey rather than sell it. So Rosh Hashanah 2020, I donated little jars of honey to the temple up here in Aptos, and I worked with the Santa Cruz Bee Company. We put together worked to donate the honey to the local temple, and now I just give it away. I have quite a few jars every 6 months or so, and if you want a jar of honey, I'm happy to send it to you. And I think it's a gift from the bees, and I actually really enjoy giving it away. It's kind of fun. People are usually really happy to have it, and yeah. So let me know if you like a jar. I'll send you some. And that's my son. He has had beehives over the last few years too. It's kind of turned into a family project, and he's talked friends into having beehives, and it's been very a fun thing for us to do together. And this is my granddaughter Ember, and hopefully she'll grow up to be a fan of bees as well. So she's a little over a month old, and yeah, so that's one of the reasons I moved up to Santa Cruz, very close. My son lives in the city, San Francisco. So let's see. So yeah, that's about it. Do you have any questions?
Well, that's a really great talk. Thank you so much. Yes, Sherry.
Yes.
It was so interesting. Thank you. I have a question about bees in the swimming pool. So if I put a dish of water with rocks, the bees will go there instead of in the pool, because they always scare people. And my granddaughter is allergic to bee stings, and she just hates to see bees in the pool. Then we have to scoop them out and then die. So
yes.
A bowl of water and rock.
Yes, and about like a plate or bigger, yeah. And shallow, and just put pebbles in it, and just keep some fresh water. And it's okay if it gets a little bit of moss growing and stuff. They like that too. but just keep some fresh water in it and they will actually go there preferably, but they're just thirsty. So
How much water? Like just like an inch or?
yeah, a couple inches, as long as they have pebbles that are dry that they can stand on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, could you repeat what you mentioned, the flowers that you mentioned would be useful for us to plant for the bees?
Absolutely. So you can buy plants like basil, thyme, rosemary, all those herbs.
Not so fast.
Oh, sorry.
She's trying to write it.
Okay, so basil.
I got it.
Thyme, rosemary.
Mhm.
Lavender is great. They love lavender, any kind. There's a variety of lavender.
Okay.
Any kind of lavender. They love bee borage, and you can get bee borage seeds and just toss them.
Bee borage, did you say?
Yes, BORAGE.
Okay.
And they're really pretty purple flower, and it's called bee borage. I used to just toss seeds out, and they love that.
Really? Thank you.
And sunflowers, if you want to plant sunflowers, toss some sunflower seeds. They love that too.
Okay, thank you. You used to, at one time, my job, you were coordinator for Riverside Helpline, I believe.
Yes.
My daughter, Pamela Mangus, her maiden name was Pasternak,
yes.
Was one of the people that was on Helpline.
Yes. Pamela was one of the most dedicated volunteers. I was the director of the helpline. It was a suicide and crisis hotline.
Yes, yes.
There for, oh gosh, like 5 years. And I will say that she was my most reliable volunteer. She would take those overnight shifts of people calling in crisis. She's amazing. So
thank you.
Yeah, I was so
she
impressed.
mentioned that she's sorry she wasn't able to be part of this meeting, but
so I
it's been taped so she can see it.
Oh, great. Thank you. I forgot.
Tell her thank you from the helpline. She's
thank you.
I'll put it up on the Temple Bethel YouTube channel.
Thank you.
So people can see it who weren't here.
So one thing I want to tell you about too, I brought some like samples. So this is very clear honey. And this is what, if you buy honey at the grocery store, typically it never gets thick and changes color. It stays nice and clear, right? So what that means is that the honey is not a regulated substance. It's not regulated by the FDA. So when you buy honey, you don't really exactly know what you're getting. So a lot of times honey producers will cut it with corn syrup. What they do is they heat it up at a high temperature, and that way it stays clear forever. And what that means also though is that you lose nutritional value in that process. So if you buy raw honey, it will eventually begin to crystallize, right? So then if you go, what's happening to my honey? It's getting really kind of sticky and buttery, and and that just means that it's raw honey and it's actually in its best form for your health. But if it gets too thick and it just turns into like, crystals, just put it in like a little water, put it on the stove in a pan of water and heat it, and eventually it will clarify again, and you'll find it will look like this again. So that's how, just don't add water, just put it in some water and warm it up, and then it will clarify again.
So Deanne, is yours raw honey?
Mine's raw honey. I don't do anything to it except just strain it to take in particulates out.
It's local from Santa Cruz.
Yes.
Because I've heard that if you have allergies, you can have honey.
Yes.
Locally, and it will help your allergies, but it has to be where you live.
Yes, I would say like within 30 miles of your home. There's a beekeeper in Riverside that sells at the farmer's market. And I think it's pretty, you just want to make sure it's raw honey, unpasteurized.
Right.
And because what you're getting are bees that are eating pollen from your area and then also pulling nectar from your area, and making honey. So
thank you.
Then when it comes to the Shalom honey, because it's from Santa Cruz, It's not as good to use it here. It's better only to use it within 30 miles of your area.
Wouldn't say that it's not, it's nutritional from a honey standpoint. If you're basically trying to alleviate allergies, maybe there are things up here that we have that you may not have down there, vice versa. So if you're just doing it mainly for the idea that you want to increase your pollen or decrease your allergies, might be better. But otherwise, I mean, you can get, if it's a good beekeeper and they have they're not, you know, using any pesticide in the hive, it's probably better than buying it in the store, put it that way. I think the one thing that beekeepers are doing from the big manufacturing honey companies is if bees get varroa mites, they'll actually put pesticides in the hive to kill the mites. And then the honey ends up with the pesticide.
I think, is it Tom's Farms or what's the place that Van Buren sells orange?
Bless Ranch, are you thinking of?
Bless Ranch.
Bless Ranch has raw honey, local.
Yes, great.
Yes.
Great. So I would do that. And just know it's going to thicken up over time. But that's always a good sign from my perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question and a comment. So I guess this hive collapse is really a big threat to California agriculture. And what are the growers up in the Central Valley doing about this? Do they just keep bringing in more hives, or?
Yeah. Right. So if you, I really recommend you watch the documentary Queen of the Sun. And it's called Queen of the Sun. It's about a 10-year-old documentary, unfortunately, but it's still very relevant. And it talks about monoculture and what's happening. But almond groves are probably one of the biggest, well, they're just a huge monoculture, right? So what happens is that these actually even came from Australia. So when they have the almond groves blooming, beekeepers from all over the world come to the Central Valley for the bloom. But what happens though is that then if you have a sick something, just sort of like migrating folks, when somebody is sick the bees come from Australia and they have a certain kind of virus, but the bees from California don't. And then we basically have a mixture of all the viruses and illnesses. They all come together. And that's probably one of the biggest issues is, but they, you know, there's a high dollar. I would say it's about $175 a hive that a grower will pay a beekeeper to bring their hives up to the groves, almond groves. So it's, you know, it's about money, and people bring their bees up. And I mean, I have friends who will do that. They'll take their bees up to the almond groves for some extra money. And then you bring them back and they're pretty depleted, and you lose some hives, and, but it's the thing. And that's, so essentially what they just keep doing is trying to bring more and more bees from all over to pollinate the trees.
So the comment was, Joan was asking about plants that bees like, and one of the ones that you named was rosemary. We have a lot of rosemary in our garden. Really does well here in Riverside, and the bees really love it. And then there have been a couple surprises out there also. We have a grevillea species that I guess comes from Australia, Grevillea nedcalli, and the bees really love that one too. So they're always swarming around that.
But we also have a lot of fruit trees. We have apricots, plums, citrus,
oranges,
and we don't have any problems getting fruit, I can tell you that.
That's great.
Oh, so let's see, Ruth, you're muted again. Can you unmute yourself? Here, I'll unmute you. Let's see, Ruth.
Deanne, Deanne, I'll call you when I'm in Santa Cruz.
I think now it's all set.
Okay.
You know, I've got all of these honeys. Most of them are commercial, unfortunately, but it says multi-floral and clover honey. And what's interesting about it is my son loves honey on things. And, you know, so I end up having quite a bit of it in the house. But so far, I've always just bought it in the store, which I guess is a mistake. But this one came from the temple, and it actually comes from France. These were little things that they sent out. So, I mean, talk about local. But anyway, it's still good. You say it doesn't spoil, right? But it doesn't have the same quality that local honey does. So once we finish all these honeys, I'll know what to do.
Yes, and I would say I mean, honey is good for us for sure. You want to be able to, the difference would be just that it's not cut with any corn syrup or anything. And additionally, yeah, local is better, but it's probably mostly that you just want to get it unpasteurized. And if you want the kosher aspect, you want to be able to get it from someone who processes it in a kosher way. So
this one is kosher. It's from Trader Joe's, actually.
Nice.
But it says kosher on it, you know, parva and kosher.
Right.
So, and it is a little bit congealed, so I'm going to put it in some warm water and see how that helps.
That'd be great.
So
Thank you, Deanne.
Deanne, if honey is organic, does that mean it doesn't have pesticides in it? Or can you get organic?
Yes. So this is a really difficult, it's a topic for me. When I started out, I've always been an organic gardener. So I wanted to produce organic honey. But the thing about it is you just don't know where a bee is foraging. So you can't actually say it's organic if your bee is going to go to the neighbor's yard and forage on a flower that's been used with pesticides. So unless there's huge fields of organic something, then there is organic honey. It's just going to be harder to find and more expensive. But if you can find it, I would do it. Because then if it's certified organic, then you know that the only flowers that foraged within 2 miles is going to be organic.
Hi, Myrna. It's good to see you.
I have two questions, Deanne. First of all, how does the mother queen decide who's going to be the other queen? Or does she?
No, so that's a good question. So if you saw the slide with all of those long cells, what they do is they take a worker bee and they feed a few of them royal jelly, which actually then changes. This is kind of magical if you think about it, but it changes those cells into queens development. And so many times there'll be like 2 or 3 queen cells. What happens is they'll hatch and they will fight. And the one that's the wins is the strongest, most resilient queen. And so then she's the one who's fit to take over the hive.
And my other question is, what makes a bee decide to sting you?
If it's basically the bee's job is to protect the hive. So the closer you are to the hive, the more likely you are to get stung. But if they see you as a threat, they're probably, like, especially if people do this, I mean, they're gonna sting you. My recommendation, if a bee's coming around you, I typically put my hands over my eyes because Africanized bees go for your eyes.
Oh.
So I close my eyes and I hear it and I wait for it to go away, but just don't swing around because then for sure you're gonna get stung if you hit it. But they don't want to sting you. They're just trying to get to flower or something. The other thing too is that they see dark colors as much larger than they see light colors. So if you're wearing a dark outfit, then you look like a bear to them. If you're wearing a lighter color outfit, then you're much less of a threat, which is why bee suits are white. So if you're wearing a darker color, just know you're going to look automatically like a threat.
I found that if I wear yellow, they like me.
Yes, you look like a flower.
It's interesting, Deanne. So do not swing if you see a bee.
No.
Just cover your eyes.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll hear them. And they'll just sit checking you out. Are you a flower? Are you anything that I would want? No, okay, and off they'll go. Or maybe there's a scent that you have that they're interested in. And they like the same things we like. They like sweet things, things that smell good and that are colorful. So that's it. They don't want to hurt you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was very,
Very good to
informative.
see you.
Thank you.
Great
Other
to see
questions?
you. Yeah, questions.
I have to admit the second question was a personal question because I've gotten stung twice. Once when I was teaching and I was out on the playground, so I'm sure I was. And the second time I know I was moving because I was on a tennis court.
Yeah.
But I was the only one who got stung and I was wearing either yellow or pink. So I guess it just liked me or didn't like the other three players that I was playing with. You don't worry about modesty because I said to this one guy who was subbing, I said, "Oh my God," I said, "Get it off." And it was down here. And I didn't give a darn, just get the stinger out of me. So when I see bees, I run in the other direction.
And if you get the stinger out, that's the most important thing. And if you can get it out, the quicker you get it out, like if you take the edge of a piece of paper or a credit card or something and get that stinger out, because it will continue to pump venom for quite a few minutes after the bee's gone. So that stinger's going to keep putting venom in you. So you get it off pretty quick, you're good. I actually get fairly swollen from bee stings. I've been stung so many times over the years. But swelling doesn't mean you're allergic to it. People seem to think they're allergic to bee stings because they get pretty swollen. And that can last up to a couple days. But it just means that your body's having a reaction to it.
They love me. They just, like mosquitoes love me. All these bugs.
Something about yeah.
So other questions? If not, that was really a fantastic talk, and thank you so much for being with us. Do not run away, but I am going to stop the recording now. So let me just do that.